You might not be ready for this story. A mother broken in the snow, a puppy too young to understand death, yet refusing to leave her side. For hours he shielded her body with his own, shivering, waiting. Not for rescue, but for a miracle. What happened next would shake even the hardest hearts. If this already pulls at yours, please like, subscribe, and stay. Because some stories don't just move us, they haunt us. The snow that morning fell in thick, hushed layers over the winding passes of Blue Ridge Mountains, North Carolina. It was the kind of cold that pressed into your bones without asking, the kind that painted every pine needle in frost and wrapped the sleepy hills in silence. At dawn, with the sun still a pale breath behind slate-colored clouds, the only sound breaking the silence was the low, steady hum of an old green Ford pickup truck as it navigated the curves of Route 146. Inside, the truck sat Oliver Grant, a 64-year-old retired forest ranger with a weather-worn face and shoulders that stooped more from kindness than age. He was a man built like the land he lived in, steady, solid, and unshaken by much. His silver beard clung to his cheeks like frost on bark, and his blue eyes still carried the calm of years spent watching nature unfold, heal, and endure. Since retiring, Oliver had taken to early morning drives with a thermos of black coffee and no particular destination. It made him feel useful in a world where time had started to forget him. As he rounded a bend near Bearstone Ridge, his headlights caught something strange, a dark shape pressed against the snowbank just off the shoulder. At first glance, he thought it might be a bag of trash tossed from a careless trucker. But as he slowed and drew closer, he saw fur-coarse, snow-dampened fur and the gentle rise and fall of breath. He slammed the brakes. What lay before him was not trash. A large female German shepherd lay still in the snow, her coat mottled with dirt and dried blood. Her hind leg was twisted unnaturally beneath her, and the snow around her belly had been disturbed in wide arcs, signs of struggle, of attempts to move. She was alive, but only barely. Curled tightly into her flank was a puppy, no more than 8 months old. His fur was a rich sable, speckled with snowflakes, and his eyes deep amber and wide with fear never left Oliver's approach. The pup let out a low growl, more of a plea than a threat, and pressed his body closer to his mother, shielding her from the stranger with his small but trembling frame. "Easy there, boy," Oliver said, hands raised. "Ain't here to hurt you." The puppy whimpered, nudged his snout into his mother's neck, and then looked back at Oliver as if asking for help he didn't know how to request. Oliver stepped out into the snow, the cold biting through his boots immediately. He approached slowly, keeping his posture low and unthreatening. He didn't get too close. He'd seen dogs protect their dead before, even from angels. But this pup wasn't mourning. He was enduring, waiting. He pulled out his flip phone, the kind with scratches on the screen and a bit of duct tape holding the back. Reception was spotty in the valley, but he managed to dial the number he kept saved for emergencies. The Blue Haven Wildlife Rescue Center, located 20 miles down the mountain. They picked up on the second ring. "Blue Haven, this is Jess. Jess, this is Oliver Grant. I've got a dog down. She's bad. Looks like she's been hit or something. Got a pup with her too. Still alive? We're near mile marker 22, East Ridge. We're dispatching a team now. Hold tight. And Oliver. Yeah? Try not to move them. Let the pup stay close if he wants. We'll be there in 20. As Oliver ended the call, he pulled the old wool blanket from his truck and slowly laid it a few feet away. The pup didn't move, just pressed closer into his mother's side, shivering but silent. The pup's name was Rex, though Oliver didn't know it yet. He was born in a rural breeding center outside Asheville, raised by handlers who were training him to become a search and rescue dog like his mother, Maya. Maya had served for 6 years in the Smoky Mountains Rescue Division. Her reputation was ironclad. Calm under pressure, fiercely loyal, and the kind of dog who wouldn't hesitate to leap into icy water for a stranger. She was tall and proud, with black and tan fur and strong, intelligent eyes. But time had worn her more from the weight of duty than age, and this last mission had been unexpected. According to later reports, Maya had leapt in front of a snowmobile that lost control while veering off trail. She had shoved a wandering child out of its path, saving the girl's life. The accident wasn't seen by many, but the aftermath was written in the blood on her fur, and the snow disturbed by small paw prints going in frantic circles. Rex had stayed. Hours had passed, snow had fallen, cold crept in like fog, and still the pup had not left her. 25 minutes later, 2 rescue vehicles arrived, their tires crunching over snow and gravel. From the front truck stepped Dr. Helen Rivers, director of the Blue Haven Rescue Center. She was in her early 50s, tall and lean, with sharp features softened by a maternal presence. Her long dark coat fluttered in the wind as she knelt by the scene, her eyes scanning everything in silence. Helen had been a trauma vet in Chicago before she lost her husband in a car accident. Grief had turned her quiet and precise, redirecting her care from people to animals, where the pain was still there, but somehow easier to hold. She had a gentle way of speaking to creatures, human or otherwise, that disarmed even the fiercest. "He hasn't left her," she murmured, her voice more breath than words. Not once. Rex stared at her with tired eyes, but didn't growl. From the second truck came Tony, a younger vet assistant in his 30s, solid built, with a tattoo of a fox on his forearm and a heart too big for the job. He helped prepare the stretcher. The team moved with caution, careful not to spook the pup. But Rex didn't fight. He only let out a soft, helpless yip as they loaded Maya onto the stretcher, her breath shallow, her leg twisted like a broken branch. Helen looked to Oliver. "We'll bring him too," she said. "He's not going anywhere without her." As the doors closed and the rescue trucks pulled away, Oliver stood beside the now empty snowbank, clutching his thermos and watching the faint paw prints fade beneath fresh snow. The wind had grown sharper by the time Dr. Helen Rivers and her team reached the veterinary intake bay of Blue Haven Rescue Center. A hush hung over the room, not the clinical quiet of sterile walls, but the kind that fell when every person knew they were watching something fragile unfold. The center itself was nestled at the edge of a pine-dense clearing, built low and wide like a lodge, with a high-beamed ceiling and windows that looked out to the snow-covered woods. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed low as the doors opened, and the rescue team carried Maya in on a reinforced stretcher, her body limp, breath faint, the tip of her ear twitching now and then as if she were dreaming of running. Rex followed on a leash, though it may as well have not existed. He stuck so close to the stretcher that the tech holding the leash, April Monroe, barely had to guide him. April, a short, freckled vet technician in her late 20s, had grown up around working dogs. She kept her hair in a messy ponytail and always wore a pair of mismatched wool socks under her scrubs. Her soft-spoken manner had calmed more than one injured canine in her years at Blue Haven. But Rex was different. He wasn't frantic, he wasn't aggressive. He was focused, watchful. Every time someone leaned toward Maya, Rex's body would shift, muscles taut, eyes alert, as if weighing whether to allow it. "He's guarding her," April whispered to Helen. "Even in here, it's like he knows who means well and who doesn't." Helen gave a tight nod. "He's not reacting out of fear. That's trained instinct and love." They moved Maya into the emergency suite, a room designed for trauma cases, equipped with heated floor panels, overhead radiant lights, and a portable imaging unit. Her leg was swollen and twisted beyond natural shape, and there were abrasions along her ribcage, likely from sliding across the icy road. April gently pressed a warm towel to Maya's side as Helen prepped the sedatives. "We'll have to fully sedate her for x-rays. It's not just the leg," Helen murmured. "There may be internal bleeding." As April prepared the IV, Daniel Crane entered Blue Haven's radiology technician. Daniel was a quiet man in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair, glasses perpetually slipping down his nose, and the patience of a stone. Years ago, he had been a military medic before losing his K-9 partner during deployment. Since then, he'd refused to work with people, saying animals never lied about their pain. He gave Rex a quick glance, respectful, then turned to Helen. "Need me to run scans?" Helen nodded. "As fast as we can. She's borderline hypothermic too." Meanwhile, April knelt down beside Rex, her hand resting lightly on his back. "She's going to be okay," she whispered, unsure whether she was comforting the dog or herself. Rex leaned into her hand, but his eyes never left Maya. Helen glanced at the pup, and then at April. "We'll need to sedate him too. If he panics when she's out of sight, it could delay everything." April hesitated. "Are you sure he'll let us?" "We'll make it gentle," Helen said. "We owe him that." She prepared a small syringe, just enough to knock him out for 30 minutes, nothing more. April cradled Rex's head in her arms, murmuring to him like a lullaby as Helen administered the injection. Rex let out one small whine, then sank slowly to the floor. Just before the sedative took full hold, his body slid sideways until his head came to rest against Maya's outstretched paw. It was April who reached for the camera, not for documentation, but because some moments deserve to be remembered. She clicked the shutter once. The image would later be uploaded to Blue Haven's site by a volunteer named Natalie Lopez, a high school student helping with social media for credit. Natalie had long, curly hair, she wore in a messy braid, and a love for animals that often overshadowed her shyness. She added a caption to the photo without thinking much. He never left her. Within hours, it had spread far beyond their sleepy mountain town. Back inside the center, Maya's x-rays confirmed the worst. Her femur had fractured in 2 places, and her hip was dislocated. There was internal bruising, but no critical organ damage. Daniel moved with the efficiency of someone who had seen worse and was determined not to see it again. "She'll need a full surgical plate," he said. "But she's strong. This dog's got willpower." Helen watched as the surgery team prepared the tools. So does her son. Rex was moved to a padded kennel nearby, lined with thermal blankets and a soft cloth that smelled faintly of Maya. He stirred now and then in sedation, letting out small yips, his legs twitching as if running in a dream. April stayed near him, monitoring his vitals while the surgery progressed. The hours passed like mist curling around bare trees. Outside, snow began to fall again, coating the windows in silence. Inside the OR, Helen worked with methodical precision, piecing Maya back together, pin by pin, suture by suture. By early afternoon, the surgery was over. "She's stable," Helen announced to the team, exhausted but relieved. "Let's move her to Recovery Room B, keep her warm, monitor the leg for swelling." April followed behind with Rex, who was starting to wake. He let out a soft, confused bark as he was wheeled past the operating wing, ears perked, body leaning forward in the crate. No, easy," April said gently. "She's close. You'll see her soon." Helen made a quiet decision. "Put his crate next to hers. If he sees her breathing, he'll settle. We can't risk him injuring himself trying to find her." They placed Rex's kennel beside Maya's recovery pen, separated by a thin plexiglass panel. As the pup blinked awake, the moment his eyes landed on his mother's slow, steady breathing, he slumped back down and exhaled. He didn't cry, he didn't pace, he simply laid his head against the wall closest to her and closed his eyes. For the first time since the snow-covered road, Rex slept deeply, and outside, the snow kept falling, soft and constant, like time exhaling. The next morning dawned with a pale glow hanging over the forests surrounding Blue Haven Rescue Center. A dusting of new snow had settled in the night, softening the sounds of the waking world. Inside the warm hallways of the center, however, there was no silence, only the high-pitched whines of a young German shepherd who had not stopped calling out since he had awoken. Rex had been transferred to a recovery crate in the hallway adjacent to Maya's sterile post-op room. The medical staff had placed him in a comfortable enclosure with soft fleece bedding, a bowl of high-protein kibble, and a hot water bottle wrapped in flannel, but none of it seemed to matter. He cried in cycles-piercing yelps that broke into short, desperate scratches against the steel grate, followed by moments of stillness where his ears stood at full alert, listening for a sound he couldn't quite find. Then the cycle repeated, his cries raw from exhaustion. April stood nearby, trying to soothe him between patient rounds. "He won't touch the food," she reported, concern pulling at her usually cheerful voice. "He's not interested in water either, just paces, whines, and scratches." Dr. Helen Rivers, who had been running on 3 hours of sleep and black coffee, looked up from a surgical chart and frowned. The dark circles under her eyes had deepened, but her posture remained upright, driven more by responsibility than rest. She had seen separation anxiety before, but this was different. Rex wasn't reacting to new surroundings or loud noises. His stress had a singular focus. He couldn't see Maya. She sighed, placing her pen down. "Move his crate," April blinked. "Where?" "Outside the observation window to Maya's room. She's still unconscious, but if he can see her, smell her, it might settle him. I'll override protocol." April nodded quickly. She knew this was not standard. Post-op patients were supposed to rest without stimulation, but protocol didn't account for this level of attachment. By mid-morning, Rex's crate was carefully wheeled in front of the large glass window that faced Maya's recovery chamber. The moment he caught the scent, his ears twitched. He stood still, nose in the air, sniffing once-twice, then pressing both front paws gently against the clear panel. On the other side, Maya lay asleep under heated lights, her hind leg bound in gauze and supported by a foam cradle. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Rex didn't cry. He sat, tail curled around his feet, and leaned against the crate wall closest to her. The silence that followed was almost as jarring as his cries had been. April returned minutes later with a fresh bowl of food and set it beside him. For the first time since his arrival, Rex sniffed at the kibble, then ate. Down the hall, another observer had silently joined the moment. 10-year-old Luke Carver sat cross-legged on the tiled floor just a few feet away, sketchbook open across his lap. Luke had sandy brown hair, always in need of a haircut, and wore thick-rimmed glasses that slid down his nose every 10 minutes. His left leg, thinner than the right, was strapped into a green orthopedic brace, a result of a birth condition that made walking difficult and painful. But Luke never complained. He simply moved slower, more thoughtfully, as if the world gave him more time to notice things others missed. Luke visited Blue Haven every Tuesday and Thursday with his mother, who worked as a physical therapist for animals in recovery. While she did her sessions in the rehab wing, Luke kept to the quiet corners, drawing dogs from behind observation windows. His sketchbook was filled with pencil illustrations, some scribbled, some remarkably lifelike, of every animal that had passed through the center in the last 6 months. But Rex was different. Luke had seen the photo online the night before, the one of the pup resting against his mother's paw. His chest tightened when he saw it. There was something in Rex's posture, the way he leaned into love as if it were the only thing holding him up, that made Luke feel understood in a way he couldn't explain. Now, sitting near the crate, he started to draw again. Rex glanced at him briefly, ears tilting, then returned his attention to Maya, but he didn't move away. That, for Luke, was enough. The following days began to settle into a rhythm. Rex stayed calm as long as Maya remained in view. When the caretakers had to close the blinds for certain treatments, Rex would whimper but no longer claw or cry. He had begun eating regularly and even let April scratch behind his ears. Sometimes, when Helen entered, he would approach the crate door and sit as if requesting a report on Maya's condition. Luke became a constant fixture, appearing each afternoon and settling beside Rex with crayons or pencils in hand. He rarely spoke, but his presence was steady. He would sometimes hold up drawings to the glass, a picture of Maya sleeping, or one of Rex with a superhero cape, and place them against the clear wall for the pup to see. It was Helen who first noticed how Rex responded. The pup would wag his tail, slowly at first, and then with increasing energy. One day he even barked a quick, sharp bark that startled the hallway staff and made Luke beam like sunrise. "You've got a friend, little guy," Helen murmured, crouching beside the crate, as Rex pressed his nose against the panel. And from the looks of it, a pretty good artist. That evening, when Helen walked into her office, she found a folded sheet of paper slipped under the door. It was one of Luke's sketches, a detailed portrait of Rex and Maya side by side, snow falling around them, warmth in their eyes despite the cold. On the back, in shaky handwriting, Luke had written, "Sometimes when you're broken, you just need someone to stay close." Helen held the paper to her chest, eyes stinging. In all her years as a trauma vet, no textbook had taught her what this boy and this dog already knew. Afternoon light streamed in through the south-facing windows of Blue Haven Rescue Center, casting long, golden stripes on the tiled hallway floor. Outside, snow had melted into wet patches, and the wind was softer now, carrying the first whispers of late winter thaw. Inside the recovery wing, however, warmth came not from the sun, but from quiet rituals built over the past week. Rituals that centered around a pup who wouldn't leave his mother's side, and a boy who refused to treat him like just another dog. Luke Carver was back, seated cross-legged on a faded blue mat he now claimed as his spot. He wore a green hoodie 2 sizes too big, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and a pair of navy sweatpants with a mud stain near the cuff. His leg brace peeked out from under the fabric like a silent reminder. But Luke had never once mentioned the pain, not to Helen, not to April, and certainly not to Rex. Today he was sketching something different, not Maya, not Rex, but both of them together. The drawing was slow and deliberate. He traced the curve of Maya's ears, the quiet tension in her brow, and the way Rex's tail always curled toward her whenever he sat. Across the top, in large, blocky lettering, Luke had written, "Safe is where you are." Rex lay in his crate, facing the glass partition as usual, but today he shifted more often. His paws twitched from time to time, and he let out little huffs like he was dreaming or impatient. Maya, though still recovering, had begun opening her eyes more frequently. Her vitals had stabilized, and her leg braced and reinforced with surgical plates was healing on schedule. But Helen noticed something else. Maya didn't just respond to medicine. She responded to her son's presence. "Every time Rex stirs," Helen said softly to April as they watched from a distance, "her heart rate lifts slightly, and when he settles again, it evens out. It's like they're linked emotionally." April nodded, arms folded. "That's not just biology, that's bond." Helen had spent 20 years in the field, had written academic papers on post-traumatic behavior in canines, and had seen soldiers break down holding their retired canine partners. But this was different. There was something in Rex's awareness, how he watched the medical staff, how he repositioned himself when Maya groaned in her sleep, how he seemed to know when to stay back and when to approach, that unsettled even her clinical instincts. She retrieved a yellow notepad from her office and began documenting observations. Subject: Rex, 8-month-old male GSD. Displays advanced protective behavior beyond typical juvenile development. Exhibits situational, emotional intelligence, modulates reaction based on human tone, prioritizes mother's well-being over food, comfort, or play. Responds uniquely to nonverbal stimuli, notably from child visitor Luke. She paused, tapping her pen. Note: emotional bond may be facilitating both dogs' healing process. Consider integrating controlled interaction for emotional rehabilitation model. Just as she finished writing, a voice called softly from down the hall. "Dr. Helen?" It was Rachel Carver, Luke's mother. She was a woman in her mid-30s with tired hazel eyes and auburn hair tied back in a braided bun. Rachel worked as an animal physical therapist and walked with the brisk purpose of someone always moving between 3 tasks at once. She had the kind of calm forged not from personality, but necessity, the kind that only single mothers of chronically ill children seem to develop. "Do you have a second?" she asked, glancing between Helen and her son down the hall. "Luke, well, he said something I thought you should know." Helen set down her notepad. "Of course." Rachel joined her near the window overlooking the recovery wing. "He told me last night that watching Rex and Maya makes him feel like someone understands." Helen looked surprised. "Understands what?" Rachel hesitated, then smiled sadly. "That fear. The kind that settles into your bones when you think your mom might not come back from surgery. When you're 7 years old, lying in a hospital bed, and they wheel her away, and you don't know if the next time you see her, she'll be whole." Helen's throat tightened. "He told me. Rex gets it." Later that afternoon, Luke stood beside Rex's crate, sketchbook in hand, and said quietly, "I used to be scared my mom wouldn't walk again. She had an accident when I was little, a car crash. Her spine's fine now, but for months. I didn't know. I just waited, like you." Rex tilted his head. "I know how it feels," Luke continued, crouching beside him, "to want to be brave but still feel like your chest's gonna crack open. But she got better. Yours will too." Rex crawled toward the side of the crate, resting his chin on the bars nearest Luke's lap. The boy smiled, then carefully slid his latest drawing through the space under the gate. It was a picture of Rex and Maya lying in the snow, a warm golden glow surrounding them like a memory. Helen watched the entire exchange from the other side of the hallway. And she didn't take notes this time. That night, after lights dimmed in the recovery wing, Helen returned to the file room. She printed a copy of Rex's intake photo and pinned it to the research board with a new label. Case Study. Emotional Synchrony in Working Dog. Pairs Observation, Focus, Rex and Maya, Bonded K9 Maternal Pair. External Variable, Human Child, Luke, with Empathetic Reinforcement Research. Status Ongoing. Impact on long-term emotional recovery. She stood there for a long time, staring at the board, wondering if science would ever catch up with what love already knew. The smell of early spring drifted in through the cracked windows of Blue Haven Rescue Center, carried by the slow melt of snow and the rustle of thawed pine. It had been 4 weeks since the rescue, a month since Maya had been brought in broken, and Rex had refused to let the cold take her. The world outside was changing, melting, softening. But inside the recovery wing, the real thaw had already begun. Maya had made steady progress. Her hind leg, once shattered in 2 places, had now begun to bear weight, though still with an awkward limp. The surgical plates beneath her fur remained stiff and foreign, but she no longer winced with every step. The light had returned to her eyes, not the alert sharpness of a working dog, but a slower, more maternal awareness. She had begun sniffing at the world again, ears twitching at sounds in the hallway, tail moving gently when familiar scents passed by. Helen had waited patiently for this day. It was early morning when she stood in front of Rex's crate, clipboard in hand, tapping the end of a pen against her chin. April was beside her, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "You're really going to let him in there?" "Supervised. 5 minutes only to start," Helen said. "No direct contact unless initiated by Maya. If she shows any signs of stress, we separate." April raised an eyebrow. "And if he jumps on her leg by accident?" Helen gave a rare, tired smile. "Rex isn't that kind of pup." With practiced care, they prepared the room. Maya had been moved into a larger enclosure designed for low-mobility patients, equipped with foam flooring, ramps, and padded bedding. The walls were lined with mirrors, not for vanity, but to monitor gait and posture during movement. Her vitals had been stable for 10 days. She was off pain medication and eating full meals. It was time. Rex was led in on a short lead. At 10 months now, his body had grown taller, limbs slightly lankier, but his eyes remained the same, steady, deep, and locked entirely on the figure in front of him. He stopped 3 steps into the room, ears up, tail still, nose twitching. Maya lifted her head from the bedding, eyes slow to focus. When they did, a low thrum left her throat. Not a growl, but something older, a sound only heard between family. Rex didn't rush. He stepped forward 1 slow pace at a time, no barking, no jumping. When he reached her side, he lowered his head, touched his nose to the air near her paws, and then gently, reverently lay down. He curled beside her, nose tucked near her rib cage, and rested his head on her injured leg as if returning home. No one spoke. Even April, who could chatter through surgery prep, had gone completely still. Helen wrote 1 word on her clipboard: reunion. Over the next few minutes, they observed in silence. Maya nudged Rex once with her snout, breathing him in. He didn't move, except to let out a small, contented sigh. The soft rise and fall of their bodies moved in quiet sync, 2 halves of something whole. From the hallway, Luke watched through the glass, his sketchbook clutched tightly to his chest. The moment stuck to the air like something sacred. By the end of the week, supervised visits became a daily part of Rex's rehabilitation. Each time he entered the room, he approached calmly, sometimes laying beside Maya, other times simply sitting and watching her sleep. The physical contact was minimal, but the emotional atmosphere was unmistakable, like 2 hearts had learned to beat in rhythm again. Meanwhile, the center prepared for Maya's next phase, gentle mobility sessions. That's when Margaret Chen joined the case. Margaret was a physical therapist specializing in canine mobility, a woman in her early 40s with sharp, symmetrical features and short-cropped black hair. She wore wire-rimmed glasses, always impeccably clean, and her voice held the calm authority of someone who had taught both dogs and humans how to walk again. Having worked at orthopedic clinics in Seattle before moving east to care for her aging parents, she had recently joined Blue Haven's team. "Her gait is uneven," Margaret observed during her first session with Maya, "but not irreparable. She's compensating with the left side, which is typical. The muscle memory from her working years is kicking in." "She's not resisting touch anymore either," April noted, helping support Maya's core as they guided her up a padded ramp. "I think she's starting to trust again." "And Rex?" Margaret asked, glancing at the pup watching nearby. He never stopped. Over time, the sessions became longer, more focused. Margaret introduced low-resistance hydrotherapy walks, where Maya could move more freely in a shallow tank. Rex often watched from the edge, ears pricked, tail thumping when she made progress. Helen noticed something else. Rex mimicked movements. When Maya lifted a paw in the tank, Rex lifted his beside her on dry land. When Maya was slow to sit, Rex sat first, watching her as if encouraging her to follow. It was April who said it aloud first. He's not just observing, he's helping. And he was. In his own quiet, intuitive way, Rex had become Maya's emotional anchor. That afternoon, Luke came in holding a new drawing. This one was different. Instead of the snowy scenes or quiet cuddles, it showed Maya walking, albeit with a limp, while Rex trotted slightly ahead. His eyes turned back as if guiding her forward. Helen took the drawing and pinned it above her desk. "It's almost like he sees the future," Luke said. "No," Helen replied softly. "It's that he believes in it." The final milestone came when Maya, unassisted, took 3 full steps toward Rex across the soft floor. It was slow, wobbly, but intentional. Rex met her halfway, and again he lay down beside her, tucking himself into that now familiar shape head on her paw, breath steady, like the snow-covered road was still beneath them, and nothing had changed at all. Morning broke with a mist curling over the trees like breath exhaled from the forest. At Blue Haven Rescue Center, birds had returned, timid and curious, flitting across the pine-lined fences and chirping with the fragile confidence of early spring. Inside the training wing, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant, leather leads, and fresh-cut wood from the indoor obstacle course. A new phase had begun. Rex stood at the entrance of the training hall, his ears perked forward, tail held low, but calm. He was nearly 11 months old now, taller and broader, with a sleek coat of sable and black. His posture was sharper, more alert, as if shaped by months of constant observation and quiet learning. But beneath the polished silhouette remained the same eyes-deep amber, thoughtful, loyal. Dr. Helen Rivers observed him from a distance, arms folded, clipboard tucked beneath one elbow. She had made the decision 2 nights ago, after Maya had finally passed her last physical assessment. The mother's recovery was steady, but her working days were over. It was time to look toward Rex's future. Helen's voice had been calm, but firm during the morning staff briefing. "Maya will stay on site as a permanent resident in the protected sanctuary. She's earned her peace. Rex, however, has potential emotional intelligence, situational focus, and a remarkable capacity for empathy. If he passes the next 3 weeks of assessment, I recommend him for the therapy dog program." No one disagreed, but there were doubts, not in Rex's ability, but in his heart. "Will he be able to work?" April had asked, "if it means leaving her?" "That's exactly what we're going to find out," Helen had replied. The first session was overseen by Marcus Doyle, a certified canine behaviorist in his early 50s, with an easy laugh and a habit of wearing worn baseball caps regardless of season. Marcus was tall and heavy-set, but moved with the surprising agility of someone who'd spent decades crouching, crawling, and running alongside dogs. His beard was more salt than pepper, and his shirt always smelled faintly of kibble and pine. He crouched beside Rex, adjusting the harness fitted snugly across the pup's chest. "You ready to learn how to be your own dog?" he asked, voice low and playful. Rex didn't move, but his eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the direction of Maya's resting area. "Thought so," Marcus smiled. "That's okay. You can love her and still grow." The obstacle course was simple at first. Tunnels, low hurdles, scent tracking. But Rex excelled, his movements fluid and precise. He didn't hesitate or glance backward. Every action was focused, as if every task was a thread pulling him forward. Marcus turned to Helen. "He's not just trainable, he's self-motivated. That's rare." Helen watched Rex weave between cones. He learned by watching her. Now he's learning by leading himself. By the second week, the training shifted from physical challenges to emotional ones. This was where Luke returned. The boy had become more than a visitor. He was now part of Rex's journey. Under Helen's supervision, Luke began helping with Rex's therapy training by acting as a mock client, mimicking behaviors of children with emotional trauma, limited mobility, or communication difficulties. Luke arrived in his wheelchair, pushed by Rachel Carver, his mother, who had tears in her eyes when Helen explained the idea. "You really think he'll respond to Luke?" "More than that," Helen said. "I think Luke will help teach him." Luke took to the role like he'd been preparing his whole life. During their first session, he refused to speak, using only basic sign language to guide Rex through tasks: sit, come, stay, lie down. Rex responded within minutes, watching Luke's hands with the same intensity he once reserved only for Maya's movements. By the end of the session, Luke leaned forward, touched Rex's snout, and signed, "Good dog." Rex pressed his head gently into the boy's lap. The therapy team at Blue Haven took notice. Sarah Jennings, a speech therapist with warm eyes and curly blonde hair tied in a bun, watched from the side with a hand over her heart. Sarah had worked with children on the autism spectrum for 12 years, her voice always soft but purposeful. After a session observing Rex and Luke together, she told Helen, "I've seen therapy dogs trained for 2 years who don't respond this intuitively. He's not just doing commands, he's connecting." Helen nodded. "That's why we're giving him the chance. He's different." But the greatest test came without a plan. One afternoon, during a break between sessions, a child visiting with his family got separated and wandered into the courtyard behind the training hall. The boy, no more than 6, had nonverbal autism and had become overwhelmed by the noises inside. While the parents and staff scrambled to find him, it was Rex who noticed first. He stood up suddenly, ears high, and began pacing at the window. When no one opened the door, he barked once sharp and purposeful. By the time Marcus opened the back exit, Rex was already running, not wildly, but with precision. They found the boy crouched by the koi pond, fingers tapping the edge of the stones in a rhythmic pattern. Rex approached slowly, head low, tail wagging gently. He didn't bark. He didn't crowd. He simply laid down nearby, facing the boy. After a moment, the boy reached out and placed his hand on Rex's paw. When Helen arrived, she didn't speak. She just watched, heart pounding, as the boy leaned into the dog's side like he had known him forever. Later that day, Rex was officially advanced to the final stage of therapy dog certification. And Helen, in the quiet of her office, placed a new label on his file: Candidate for Companion Leadership, Pediatric Tier. Luke was there when she made the announcement to the team. "Does that mean he passed?" he asked, his eyes wide. Helen smiled, crouching beside him. "It means he's more than ready." Luke grinned and looked down at Rex. "Told you were brave." Rex responded with a soft woof and wag of his tail. And from her resting space in the sanctuary meadow, Maya lifted her head, ears twitching faintly as if she somehow knew her son was finding his own path, not apart from her, but because of her. The morning sky over Blue Haven was a quiet watercolor, soft streaks of lavender melting into pale gold. Dew clung to the blades of grass in the sanctuary meadow, and mist rolled slowly between the tree trunks, like the breath of something ancient and kind. Today marked the last day of Rex's formal training, but for everyone who had followed his journey, it was more than a graduation. It was the beginning of a calling. Inside the training hall, banners had been strung by the interns, nothing grand, just a few blue and white ribbons, and a sign painted by Luke in bold, uneven brushstrokes. "Congratulations, Rex, our hero with a tail." Below it, his mother Rachel had added a quieter line in small cursive: "Healing takes more than medicine." The final test had been passed the day before. It was a full-day simulation at Hopefield Elementary, where Rex had interacted with 10 children facing a variety of challenges: autism, selective mutism, motor impairments, and PTSD. He had moved with gentle precision, responding not to commands but to feelings. One child had cried silently in a corner. Rex had approached slowly, lying beside her without making a sound. Within minutes, her hand had reached for his fur. Dr. Helen Rivers stood now in front of the open crate where Rex waited calmly, his vest already fastened. Today it read, "Certified Therapy Dog, Pediatric Unit." Her fingers lingered at the strap near his shoulder, adjusting it unnecessarily. She wasn't ready. Helen had spent the last several weeks watching Rex transform from a protective pup into a creature of purpose. In every line of his movement, there was a kind of quiet determination, never hurried, never hesitant. And yet, beneath that resolve still lived the soul of a son who had once refused to leave his injured mother in the snow. April entered the room, carrying a small silver pin shaped like a paw print. "Luke wanted you to have this," she said, placing it gently in Helen's palm. "He says it's from both of them." Helen smiled and fastened it to Rex's vest. "He's always been a better communicator than he thinks." The center's staff had gathered outside for the farewell walk, a simple lap around the recovery grounds, a tradition reserved for animals who completed their training and were preparing for new roles in the world. Rex stepped out to a small round of applause, his ears flicking once in acknowledgement. He didn't bark. He never did when it wasn't needed. Among the onlookers stood Bob Miller, a wildlife photographer in his early 60s, with sun-lined skin and a Canon camera always slung around his neck. Bob had come to Blue Haven 2 months ago on a project to document rehabilitation stories for a national awareness campaign. He had expected injured eagles and recovering wolves, not this. But when he first saw Rex laying beside Maya, head on her paw like a vow, he knew he was witnessing something rare. Bob wasn't a sentimental man, but he hadn't stopped coming since. He now walked with a slight limp from an old field injury, but it never slowed the way he moved behind a lens. His pictures had already made their way into classrooms, newspapers, and the walls of Blue Haven itself. Today he raised the camera slowly. "Last lap, buddy," he murmured. "Let's make it count." Rex began walking the outer perimeter of the center, guided loosely by Marcus, who had traded his ball cap today for a proper collared shirt. The path curved gently along the tree line, past the hydrotherapy shed, the community garden, and finally toward the sanctuary meadow, where Maya rested. She was lying beneath the same maple tree they had visited during her first outing from surgery. The ground was soft, the grass speckled with early wildflowers, and her blanket was folded neatly beneath her side. Though her gait remained uneven, Maya had learned to move with grace again, relying on strategy over speed. Her role had shifted from guardian to elder, from rescuer to symbol. When she saw Rex approach, her ears lifted slightly. Rex paused near the edge of the grass. No command was given. He stepped off the gravel, moving slowly toward her, his paws sinking gently into the soil. No crowd followed. The others waited silently at a respectful distance. Maya raised her head. Rex lowered his, then bent gently and licked the scarred joint of her leg, the one that had once been broken, that had once made everyone wonder if she would ever walk again. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was quiet, familiar. Maya exhaled softly, a breath, long and slow, like the releasing of something carried too long, and then she closed her eyes. Bob, standing 50 feet away, took the shot. The image would become the centerpiece of the national campaign. It would carry no headline, just a single caption in white against the green of the meadow. "No one ever really leaves when love remains." That evening, Helen sat with Bob in the observation lounge. The photograph had just finished printing, still warm from the inkjet. She held it carefully, thumb brushing the edge. "You think they understand the weight of moments like that?" she asked. Bob didn't answer immediately. He was studying the photo with an almost reverent stillness. "They don't need to understand," he said finally. "They just live them. That's what makes it real." Across the center, Luke was placing a drawing on the door of Maya's meadow pen, a crayon portrait of Rex walking ahead, and Maya watching from behind, smiling. A full year had passed since the snow-covered morning when Maya had been found broken beside the road, and her pup refused to leave her side. Seasons had turned like quiet pages, snow into spring, bloom into sun, and now a warm golden October painted the trees of Blue Haven in hues of fire and honey. The wind smelled of dry leaves and pine, and the sanctuary meadows rustled with the slow rhythm of change. Maya had settled into her new life with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing left to prove. Though she still carried a limp, it never stopped her from wandering the tall grass or sunbathing beneath the maple where she and Rex had once said goodbye. But she was never truly alone. Over time, she became a quiet guide for the others, mostly abandoned mothers who had been brought in from roadside shelters or illegal breeding rescues. She wasn't their leader, but she was their anchor, a presence, calm and constant. There was Juno, a scrappy black Labrador with cropped ears and a nervous gait. Saffron, a golden mutt with a scar across her muzzle, but a heart too big for her chest. And Lacey, a wiry greyhound who refused to eat unless Maya was near. They followed her without command, napping near her favorite spot, trailing her as she limped from water trough to shaded hollow. The staff at Blue Haven had taken to calling her the matriarch. And while Maya never barked for authority, one glance from her was enough to settle even the most anxious newcomer. Helen often found herself watching from the observation deck with a mug of tea in hand, smiling as Maya lay surrounded by the others like a queen without a crown. Her days were simple now. No more therapy sessions, no more medications, just fresh air, soft ground, and the occasional visit from someone who remembered what she had done. Meanwhile, in a school just 12 miles away, Rex had found a different kind of home. Bright River Elementary was a modest school tucked on the edge of town, with faded murals of animals painted across its outer walls, and a playground where the swings always squeaked. It was there, in room 12, that Rex reported each morning, vest on, posture proud, tail wagging just slightly, as if greeting the day with reverence. His official partner was Emma Price, a 7-year-old girl with dark brown curls, olive skin, and eyes that never quite met yours unless she trusted you. Emma had been diagnosed with nonverbal autism at age 3. For most of her early schooling, she rarely spoke and often reacted to noise or sudden change with panic. Teachers tried sensory tools, routines, therapy, animals. Nothing worked until Rex walked into the room that spring. Emma had approached him first, no prompting, no instruction. She walked straight to where he sat beside his handler and touched the patch of fur behind his ear. Rex didn't move, just turned his head slightly and exhaled. From that moment, she followed him like a shadow. Over time, the classroom began to change. Emma started humming when Rex entered. She smiled during group reading if he sat by her desk. She touched other students' shoulders gently, a behavior modeled from watching Rex nudge a peer who dropped a pencil. And one morning in early fall, she whispered her first word in front of the entire class. Rex. Her teacher, Miss Aria Benton, had cried at her desk during recess. A petite woman in her 30s with a long braid and paint always on her sleeves, Aria was known for her patience and fierce belief in her students. Her classroom had plants in the window, shelves of mismatched books, and a sticker chart not for rewards but for recognizing kindness. She often said that Emma had taught her more about connection than any degree ever could. At the end of each school day, Rex would walk Emma to the bus and sit until she boarded. Once the doors closed, he'd watch it disappear around the bend before turning back to the staff handler with calm acceptance. He had work to do, but he never forgot to wait. One Saturday each month, Helen made the trip to Bright River to check in on Rex's progress. These weren't medical checkups, they were stories. She sat in a small room with staff, families, and children who had been impacted by Rex. There were dozens, some with autism, others with social anxiety, speech delays, selective mutism. Each had found a moment of peace in Rex's presence. And so, when the annual National Human-Animal Bond Conference invited Helen to speak on therapeutic partnerships, she didn't hesitate. On the morning of her presentation, she stood at a podium in a small lecture hall in Asheville, blazer pressed, hair pinned back, glasses perched carefully on her nose. But her words were anything but clinical. I've been a trauma vet for over 20 years, she began. I've seen healing through medicine, through surgery, through time, but what I witnessed between Rex and Maya, and later, between Rex and a little girl who barely spoke, was a kind of healing that defied textbooks. She clicked the remote. A photo appeared on the screen. Rex curled beside Maya in the snow, just after their rescue. Another click, Emma, resting her head on Rex's shoulder in a reading corner. He didn't just save his mother, Helen continued, voice catching slightly. He saved many others, not by barking or alerting or obeying, but simply by being a creature who refused to abandon someone who needed him. And that's something every child he meets seems to understand, even when they don't have the words. The room was silent, a few wiped tears. And somewhere in the audience, Bob Miller sat near the back, camera forgotten in his lap, just listening. Afterward, someone asked Helen what made Rex special. She smiled. He's not unique because he's perfect. He's unique because he remembers, and he chooses to stay. That evening, back at Blue Haven, Rex visited the sanctuary for the first time in months. Not in uniform, just as a son. He found Maya near the maple, resting as always. When she saw him, she lifted her head, and despite the stiffness in her joints, she stood to greet him. They didn't touch noses or leap into play. They just walked side by side through the meadow once more. Different journeys, one heart, always home. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they come as a trembling pup who refuses to leave his mother's side. Rex didn't have a voice, but his choice spoke louder than any words: to stay, to protect, to love without question. And maybe that's the kind of miracle God sends us when the world feels cold. In a time when it's easy to give up or look away, this story reminds us that faith can live in silence, and love can endure through the darkest hours. Through Rex, we saw more than devotion, we saw grace. Quiet, unwavering grace. If this touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs a little light today. Leave a comment below, your reflections, your hopes, or simply type Amen to honor the love that never lets go. May God bless you, and may we all, in some small way, become someone's miracle.